My dear students of class 10A and 10B, today the same lesson, the Independence Act, I am going to analyze certain points, I am going to teach certain points, independence and partition of India. The remaining part of the Indian Independence Act I am going to teach you. Today I am going to teach you the remaining part of the Indian Independence Act of 1947. The remaining part. What is about the terms and conditions? What were the terms and conditions in the Indian Independence Act of 1947 framed by the British? Already I started teaching it and some points are left. Now I am going to teach it. The first one, end of jurisdiction of British Parliament. End of jurisdiction of British Parliament. End of jurisdiction of British Parliament. You know, the legislative authority, it was decided that the legislative authority of the British Parliament would be seized by 1947, 15th August, by 15th August 1947. And second one, the title of the Emperor of India, the King of England, this type of titles were dropped as per the system of the Indian Independence Act of 1947. The titles of the Emperor of India, King of England, these kind of titles would be dropped or were dropped. And another one point, that till the new constitution was framed, you know, each of the dominions and all provinces of India would be governed in accordance with the Act of 1935. Clear? Till the Constitution of India, new constitution, before on the eve of shifting power, the constitution, till the constitution were framed, still the constitution was framed, each dominion and all provinces of India would be governed, or were to be governed by whom? By the British. Under which act? Under the Act of 1935. The Governor General was given the special power to modify or adapt the Indian Independence, another previous Indian Independence Act of 1935, and by March 31st, 1948. Once again I repeat, for your better understanding, the Governor General was given special right to modify or to adapt the Government of India Act of 1935 by March 31st, 1948. And last one, end of jurisdiction of British Parliament. Last point, the right of the king to veto laws was given up. The right of the king to veto laws was given up, and instead of it, that would be the right of the king to veto laws was given up, and then this right was given to whom? This right was given to the Governor General of India. That means instead of the Governor General, instead of the king, the right to veto laws would be given to whom? Would be given to the Governor General of India. These are the important clauses of end of jurisdiction of British rule in India. End of jurisdiction of British rule in India. And next point, you know, Indian Independence Act 1947. Indian Independence Act 1947, that is jurisdiction. Another point, India, end of jurisdiction of the British Parliament completed. And next one, princely states. Next point, princely states. The princely states would become free. The princely states would become independent of all powers exercised by whom? By the British authority once. And these powers of princely states which were exercised by the British once were to be terminated. All the treaties with them, all the treaties and agreements with the princely states by the British would become lapse from August 15, 1947. All the treaties and agreements, whatever were signed between the British government and the princely states, would become null and void by 15th August 1947. And that would be, they would be free to associate themselves either with either two dominions. They would decide whether they would remain with any dominion or would enjoy independence or would remain independent. As per this point, the princely states would be, as per this system, princely states would be declared independent. And next point, treaties and agreements. Next point, treaties and agreements. Treaties and agreements. Treaties and agreements. With effect from August 15, 1947, with effect from August 15, 1947, it was decided that His Majesty's government, means the British government, would cease. The British government would cease to have any responsibilities for the government and government of India. All treaties and agreements between the British government and the rulers of Indian states or any authority of India or in tribal areas would lapse or would become null and void. Agreements with the tribes and northwestern frontiers, your frontier province, were to be negotiated by the dominion concerned, and besides, they would decide whether they would be a part of any dominion that will be decided by themselves through the process of negotiation. That means all the treaties and agreements between the British government and Indian rulers were to be lapsed. The treaties and agreements between the British government and Indian rulers were to be lapsed by the 15th August 1947, the day when the power would be shifted to the Indians. And this is the last point. And next one, another more 2 points. Division of the army and the assets. Division of the army and assets. Division of the army and assets. Division of the army and assets. Provisions were made for the division of the Indian Navy, Indian Army between the two dominions. And steps were to be taken to share the assets and liabilities between the two dominions. That means provisions were made for the division of the Indian army between the two dominions. The Indian army would be divided for the two dominions, one for India and another one for Pakistan. And steps also were to be taken to share the assets and all liabilities between the two dominions, India and Pakistan. The next point, bringing the act into operation. Bringing the act into operation. Bringing the act into operation means the Governor General was vested with necessary powers for bringing Indian independence into effective operation. The Governor General was assigned to, or the Governor General was vested the special power to shift power to the two dominions by means of thorough discussion with the leaders of different parties and by this way they would bring the Indian independence. They would bring the Indian independence with effective operation. And next point, office of Secretary of State and interest of existing officers. Office of the Secretary of State and existing officers. Interest of existing officers. That means provisions were made for safeguarding the interest of the existing officers appointed by the Secretary of State. Those officers who are appointed by the Secretary of State, there would be some provisions for them in order to safeguard their interest. That means on the eve of independence, the officers, the existing officers who were appointed by, by the Secretary of State, British Secretary of State, what would be their future? In order to safeguard the interest of the existing officers, some provisions also were to be made for them. And besides, another most important point, the office of the British Secretary of State would be abolished. The office of the British Secretary of State would be abolished. So these are the the remaining clauses of the Indian Independence Act of 1947. The Indian Independence Act of 1947. The point which I started from the beginning. Now I completed teaching of all the clauses of Indian Independence Act. The remaining 5 clauses of the Indian Independence Act of 1947. Now I completed the first one. End of jurisdiction of the British Parliament. Second one, princely state. Third one, treaties and agreement. Fourth one, division of the army and the assets. And fifth one, bringing the act into operation. And last one, office of the Secretary of State and interest of existing officers. These are the important 5 clauses of the Indian Independence Act of 1947. Some important terms and conditions they made in accordance with the need and requirement of the existing departments, and it is due to that reason, as per this system, as per the clauses, terms and conditions of Indian Independence Act of 1947, all the leaders of different parties of India, they unanimously accepted all the terms and conditions of Indian Independence Act of 1947, and then the British decided to cede power to the Indians. They signed in the agreements, they signed in the treaties, they signed in Indian Independence Act of 1947 that all the clauses, all the terms and conditions of the Indian Independence Act of 1947, the leaders or those who would be assigned to rule the country, they had full consent, and they consented it. Then their signatures, and so it was decided that then the power would be shifted to the 2 dominions, India and Pakistan. So, and apart from this, another point that is also a very crucial point for discussion, the princely states. The princely states would become independent. That princely states were going to be independent, they knew it. But yet, although the princely states were going to be independent on the eve of the proposal for shifting of power for the Indians, they knew it. Yet, the powers exercised by the British authorities decided that powers were to be terminated. The powers, that means the British would have no control over the princely states of India. And the British, with reference to the states, all the terms and conditions, all the agreements, all the treaties with the princely states would become lapse. And the princely states would become free to associate themselves with either any of the 2 dominions, or they may remain independent. these are the terms and conditions with the princely states under the Indian independence of 1947 mentioned, and treaties and agreements with the Indian government, British government and Indian rulers also were considered to be lapsed. All the treaties and terms and conditions between the British government and Indian rulers were to be terminated or would become null and void, except the Northwest Frontier Province. The Northwest Frontier Province was given special rights that their problems would be negotiated by means of thorough discussion with the other, authorities or other rulers, and then they would decide in which part they would remain, India or Pakistan. That will be decided by themselves through the process of negotiation. And another most important factor that is very important, British themselves decided to introduce that system in the Indian independence of 1947 without having any proposal on the part of Indian leaders. What was about it? They decided that they would not use any title like Emperor of India, King of England by 15th August 1947. British Parliament asked them to cease from August 15, 1947. Would cease from August 15, 1947. According to which the British decided to abolish all their titles like Emperor of India, like King of England. They decided to abolish this type of titles from royal style, from the point of from royal style, from the humanitarian ground. On the humanitarian ground, the British decided to abolish all the titles like Emperor of India, King of England, like this. They decided to abolish these titles and were dropped from the royal style. These titles were dropped. They decided that these titles were dropped from the royal style, dropped from the royal style. So, my dear students, up to this, next day, the remaining part will be continued. Thank you.